Learning is the creation of a new neural pathway between two neurons. So you have to, any time in the world that you are forging a new pathway between two things, it takes effort. Otherwise, inertia isn't going to mobilize anything. So, what we're seeing a lot with Gen AI, where they just will give students the answer without making them engage in that mental effort, I think is going to be problematic.
Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Tessa Forshaw joining us. Tessa is a cognitive scientist and one of the co-founders of the Next Level Lab at Harvard University. She is the inaugural faculty chair of Workforce and Workplace Learning and the faculty director of the Workforce Learning and Innovation Initiative at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She is also the co-author of Innovation-ish, How Anyone Can Create Breakthrough Solutions to Real-World Problems in the Real World. So today we are going to talk about learning in the workplace. Welcome to the show, Tessa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Well, Tessa, let's jump in. Please give our listeners the elevator pitch version of your story.
I love that idea of an elevator pitch. So I'm Australian. Let me get that out of the way because I think my accent will betray me.
Big surprise.
Yeah, as long as none of you think I'm a Kiwi, we'll be okay. But no, I'm Australian originally, and I started my career from an arts degree, wondering what on earth should I do with my life. And so, of course, like anybody, I went into consulting and decided I needed to get some just like general skills, any skills, was a good step. And I fell into a practice within the organization I was working for that was focused on talent and organization strategy. And that really resonated with me. I was a sociology undergrad, and I looked a lot at technology and our affective relationships to technology. And so I really became interested in how people interacted and used technology, and then how people learned alongside it. And I worked there for the better part of a decade, starting to lead some big workforce learning transformations, both for companies alongside ERP implementations, but also workforce development initiatives around the world that were looking at reskilling folks, even, in 2012 when it wasn't yet a buzzword. And I had this moment where I realized I was building all of these things, but I didn't actually understand how the brain learned. And that felt sort of problematic to me. And I was making these decisions and these beautiful, strategy visuals of blended learning solutions and all of these sorts of things. But like, were they the right thing? Did any of them actually result in like neurological or cognitive change? And so I took myself off to grad school. And I went to Stanford and learned that the answer to my question was that most of the practices I had been employing were maybe not quite the thing to do. And from there, I pursued a path in academia, and that sort of led me to where I am today, where I lead the workplace and workforce learning concentration at HGSE, and support folks in practice and students going into practice in workplace and workforce learning to be armed with the learning sciences and the academic research underlying how we learn.
Excellent. Well, we definitely need all of that. If you had to pick an event in your life that was a key accelerant for you and your career path, what would that be?
Great question. So I was standing on a military base with one of these programs that I was designing. And this is back in the day of a BlackBerry. I got an email from a friend that was an article saying that learning styles weren't real. And we had just implemented a whole thing based on learning styles. And I was sitting there reading this article being like, this is not great, this situation. And so that for me was like the big call that what I had been feeling was valid, and what started me to uh, dive into understanding a little bit more of the science about how we learn, and then going to grad school. So that moment of humility.
Yeah, the whole learning styles thing, much of my career have, people have told me, "Oh, I'm an auditory learner, I'm a visual learner." And boy, oh boy, once that gets in somebody's mind that they are that thing, that person, it's really hard to. You got all the data in the world, all of the academic research in the world that says that really doesn't drive results, but convincing somebody that is not the case is a really tall order.
Yeah, I agree. I often face that situation too, where so in my work, I actually talk a lot about neuromyths. And I often find myself sharing that learning styles have no academic foundation, or similarly, that the idea of being right brained or left brained, and therefore being creative or analytical, which in cognitive science, we call this myth personality based hemispheric dominance, also has no founding in science. And it's really fascinating watching how people have built entire identities around these complete myths about how their brain works, and how companies often have spent like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and collectively, I suppose, hundreds of millions of dollars investing in programs on fake science. It's certainly problematic.
Yeah, well, we have a lot to talk about today: innovation, learning science, cognitive science. Let's start with the Workforce Learning and Innovation Initiative at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Let our listeners know what this is all about and what its primary purpose is.
Absolutely. So, really excited that we are taking a step in this direction. The Harvard Graduate School of Education has such a long and rich history of research and teaching about how people learn, both from a cognitive perspective, but also a socio-relational, system, and contextual perspective. And historically, that's been really focused on what we would call like K through 21 thereabouts, and as well as sort of pre-K or teacher educators or teacher professional development. Um, but as we know, when you turn 18 and you step outside of a formal education institution, your brain doesn't miraculously learn in a different way. And so actually a lot of what we know from this amazing body of knowledge is really applicable to workplace and workforce learning. And so we're making a really big conscious effort to pull some of that relevant research into this space, and to stand up a body of knowledge to support folks as we enter this, or we continue through, I should say, this very unique time in history where learning and working is happening in and the same moment. Job disruption is frequent and everywhere. Task disruption is frequent and everywhere. And so the need to learn rapidly and in the moment is increasing, and the role of L&D is changing. So that's the sort of the rationale for the initiative, but it really has three components. So the first is research that's focused on workplace and workforce learning, specifically around what is effective, what are good practices, how do we connect how the brain learns to those practices, and what does it look like alongside and as mediated by technologies. And then the other two initiatives are a concentration for master's students. So masters of education students that come to HGSE can now enroll in a concentration that's focused on workplace and workforce learning, and have additional programming and classes that tailor to that area. And then secondly, a certificate program that is for anybody in the industry that they can enroll in. It's available via our website, and I'll make sure that we share with you a coupon code for the show notes. But it's about $1,600. It's accessible to anybody, and the rationale for that is really that we want to make sure that we're connecting research to practice and really helping the individuals whose life is impacted or enabled by effective workplace learning practices today.
Yeah. So I'm putting myself in the shoes of the senior workforce development, learning and development professional at major corporation XYZ right now. And I am really, my interest is now piqued about this concentration and the certificate that anybody can go engage in to help create better learning and development professionals. Take me inside that concentration, and especially the certificate program that's available for everybody. What should I expect as this L&D leader coming in to engage with this certification?
Yeah, absolutely. So, particularly as it regards to the certificate program, we're centering it around 5 kind of core concepts about learning that are essential for L&D practitioners today, and they are just to share those with you. So the first is the idea that learning is a neurological, biological, and cognitive process, and so that behavior change results from changes in the mind, which in turn results from changes in the brain, which in turn result from changes at a cellular level. And so really understanding that there are hormonal or neurochemical things that can inhibit and enable learning, and remembering that it ultimately is a neurobiological and cognitive process that we're trying to enact. So that's the first. The second is that learning happens in relationships with more experienced others. So really looking at, especially today, how do we better support people to have relational in the moment learning? Because we know that when more experienced people share their mental models and they show what success look like and they set clear expectations, that novices can become experts in some of the most effective and efficient ways. The third is that learning must be situated in context. So talking about what real learning in the flow of work looks like, as opposed to receiving real-time learning from a training module in the flow of work, but what real learning in the flow of work looks like. The fourth is that learning takes effort. And I think this is particularly important as we start thinking about educational tools and AI and how they are involved in learning, and that engaging with tools that eliminate friction and eliminate effort as required by the user are actually not helpful learning tools, and they won't translate to learning. And then the final one is that learning must be framed to transfer and adapt if we want people to be able to use it in novel contexts and rapidly changing tasks as we face sort of task disruption and role disruption.
Yeah, I really like number 4. Learning is the process of being uncomfortable and moving through that uncomfortability to a new place. And, our listeners know that I grew up in the learning and education space, and there's so much content out there that I liken to easy button process. Just give me the easy button to get through this learning, make it as comfortable as humanly possible. And lo and behold, that doesn't yield good results. So thank you for Module 4 in that program. Excellent.
It's one of my favorites too. I often try to describe this to people as, so, coming back to principle 1, it's neurobiological. Learning is the creation of a new neural pathway between 2 neurons. So you have to, any time in the world that you are forging a new pathway between 2 things, like if you dig a trench in the ground between 2 points, it takes effort. That needs effort and momentum behind it. Otherwise, inertia isn't going to mobilize anything, any kind of change. And so all of these tools that exist out there that are just about eliminating the friction, or what we're seeing a lot with Gen AI, where they just will give students the answer without making them engage in that mental effort, I think is going to be problematic.
Yeah, Bingo. So before we cut to a really quick break, as you think about the new Workforce Learning and Innovation Initiative, what's the most exciting practical innovation in learning that you expect to come out of that initiative?
So I think one of the most practical things that we're hearing from folks who've gone through the program is that they're recognizing the value of supporting learners to have learning ecologies. So helping them have really complex and integrated environments around them, be that different people, some formal learning, some self-paced resources or self-accessed resources, peer groups, all sorts of different nodes around them that they can integrate with and interact with as they need. Rather than thinking about learning design as the delivery of a single piece of formal content. And so that's been one of the most practical shifts that we've heard from folks who've been going through the certificate program.
So if I'm hearing that correctly, instead of linear paths through content, you're talking a much more rich multimodal environment for folks to navigate through instead of a well-defined path. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, very close. So I think the path is a great point. So when I first started in the industry, it was very talk and chalk. I'm sure you remember that. And then it moved a little bit to what we would call like learning paths. And we had these LMSs that would say, okay, do this one and then this one and then this one and this one. And it was this like pathway.
Yeah.
This is thinking about this in a little bit more of a networked way. So there actually isn't a pathway through anything because you're sort of in a constant state of learning and mastery as a cycle or a spiral. And so if you think about it as you're spiraling through and as you keep going into the spiral, you build more and more mastery. And as you go, you're pulling on the different parts of your network nodes that you need based on who you are and what you know and your context and where you are. And so the role of L&D is to set up better learning networks or learning ecologies than it is to create a learning pathway.
Yeah, and hopefully we're spiraling up and toward some new improved version of ourselves versus spiraling down
into the anxiety. Yes, I agree.
Into the abyss. Yes, let's avoid the abyss. We're going to take a really short commercial break. We'll be right back with Tessa Forshaw. Want to understand money, markets, and the economy to make better financial decisions? I'm Andy Temte. Join me every Saturday morning for Money Lessons with Andrew Temte on YouTube or your favorite podcast streaming service. And we're back with Tessa Forshaw talking about innovation and learning. Tessa, let's shift to your book, Innovation-ish. What's the core thesis of the book? And if you ran into somebody on the street who'd read the book, what would you want their unaided recall to be?
So the core thesis of the book is that anybody can create breakthrough solutions to real problems in the real world. And if you ask my co-author, Rich, who is also my co-teacher for a long time at Stanford and at Harvard, for him, that is much more about the innovation and the organizational change and so on. For me, that is much more about the fact that every human has the capacity to be creative and to engage in the cognitive processes that are involved in creativity. And I think that just to connect it to learning for a second, the reason that I love these two topics and bring them together a lot are because a lot of the core processes involved in the act of creative problem solving are the same as they are as in learning. Learning is an act of creative problem solving. Creative problem solving is an act of learning. and a lot of the core skills like holding two things to be true at once, navigating ambiguity and sitting with uncertainty, coming up with divergent ideas, engaging with people for input, being able to hold yourself accountable, move yourself forward, and take small steps. All of those sort of core things of creative problem solving are also essential to navigating work today as it is evolving. So it's sort of this blended little melting pot of thoughts for me. But the key thing that I want someone to take away from is actually best said by my great aunt, her friend. So she gave, as all good aunties do, everybody she knows innovation-ish for Christmas.
Of course. Why wouldn't you?
Everyone. And one of her friends she sent it to lives in a small town in Australia called Castlemaine and is a mechanic. And he sent me an email after receiving the book and told me that innovation-ish had fundamentally changed his life. And I was like, what? Like, you're a mechanic from a small country town. That seems wild to me. And he was like, I had a whole garage floor full of problems that I had given up on because they hadn't worked the way that I had thought they should, from my very engineer mechanical kind of, linear way of thinking that I've been taught. And the idea of picking them back up felt overwhelming, and I'm sure that I could do something creative with them, but I had no idea where to start, and I just couldn't engage. And what innovation-ish taught me was that I can take on one thing small at a time and try it, and that I'm allowed, even though I think of myself as linear, I'm actually allowed to come up with divergent, wild, crazy ideas for how different things might work, and test something and fail, and test something and fail, and test something and fail, and just keep going in this sort of small and contained way. And it doesn't have to be that, like, I've come up with an idea, I've evaluated the whole thing, and now I'm going to build a whole new massive thing from scratch. And so what I read in between the sort of lovely prose of this email was that it lowered the bar to entry for him. And it meant that him, even in his everyday life, was now giving himself permission to take some more creative steps.
Excellent, excellent. I like to run what I call mentorship moment, where we do a hypothetical, a little thought experiment. Tessa, you now have a team leader sitting in front of you right now, and the team that they're leading feels pressure to innovate from those on high, the senior leadership in the C-suite. But they're stuck in the rut of the status quo and all the competing demands of day-to-day operations. Based on your work in innovation-ish, what's your advice to this leader?
I think that my first piece of advice to this leader is to name what's happening. So what's probably happening in this environment is what we term in the book innovation hesitation. So innovation hesitation is made up of three core components, which ultimately amount to, Andrew, everything that you just said about what was happening. Sort of organizational pressure, status quo, cognitive caution, a belief in innovation being this big, crazy, scary thing that only happens in billion-dollar circular buildings and not in their small meeting room. So the first thing that we have found really effective is in naming that at the moment we're facing as a team innovation hesitation. One of the reasons that's effective is like in CBT, naming and anxiety is a very effective strategy. Innovation hesitation is a form of anxiety. And innovation hesitation tends to exist whether or not, like, it exists in the world, and organizations can amplify it or disarm it depending on their behaviors. And so therefore leaders can amplify it or disarm it, but it still exists. So naming it's helpful. And
I want to interrupt you just for a second, because we have a TLA, a 3-letter acronym alert for our listeners. You said CBT. I want to make sure everybody understands what that is.
Yes, thank you so much. Cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a method of a cognitive psychology mechanism that's often used to help people who have anxiety and other similar mental health challenges. And it is uh, predominantly around identifying your thinking patterns, and naming things, and helping in that process of naming, eliminating the power that they give or they yield in your own mind. And it's proven to be very effective at
Excellent.
similar things to this.
Excellent. Back to your mentorship moment.
No, that's great. So engage CBT and name what's going on. Innovation, hesitation. And then I think just like we saw with the mechanic, I think the next step is to lower the threshold. When we ask a team to innovate, sometimes we are accidentally engaging that innovation hesitation. We're engaging the idea that innovation has to be this moonshot or Mars shot, as it is today, I suppose, idea. It has to be billions of dollars, groundbreaking, revolutionary, completely and utterly novel. And it often is going to take many years, and it's a huge thing. But instead, innovation can be something small. Innovation could be improving the invoicing process at work. I know I would love it if someone would innovate on our invoicing process. That would have a real impact to all of the people who engage with that process, right? And so it's novel and impactful, and that to me is innovation. So I think, look, name what's happening and then lower the threshold. Help them realize that we can take on a small step. We can do a jump shot or a roof shot. It doesn't have to be a moonshot or a Mars shot to really lower it down.
All right. Excellent. Well, Tessa, I'm a huge advocate for ensuring that learning investments are made in the flow of work. We were talking about this before the show today. For most learning professionals and organizations, this is a lot easier to say than to do. Can you give us some practical advice on how to install learning into the flow of work and not have learning feel like something extra that everybody has to do after work, or that it's some easy button afterthought?
Yeah. So I think learning in the flow of work is such an interesting term because it's, I think, sort of been a little bit a mountain's been made out of a molehill, is I think what I'm trying to say. And so often now when it's utilized, people think of like just in time notifications coming in from their SAP HANA system telling them where to click if they've hovered over something long enough, right? And these like injections throughout their work that add attention and friction and are quite hard to architect. Or we think about them as, really, really intensive moments where someone is watching what someone is doing and interjecting at moments in the flow. But if you look at portraits of apprenticeship from the Middle Ages, you will see portraits of learning in the flow of work. You will see a master apprentice standing there with their apprentice, and they are engaging in something where the master is doing a task and the apprentice is watching and replicating the task while they are both productively executing a task. And that is, I think, at the core what I think of when I think of learning in the flow of work. So why is this really important, and how do we instill it? I think we instill it by bringing learning back to something that happens in context and in relationships. So supporting managers and more experienced others in organizations to be better mentors and better apprentices. Supporting learners to be better learners, and not just to expect the learning to happen in a classroom, but to help them learn the skills they need to elicit mental models and think alouds from their superiors and the people that they're working alongside. And then building sort of that learning into the way that the organization goes about executing work. And of course, having moments of reflection to discuss it and look at it and augment it and play with it and dismantle it. What am I trying to say? Bring it apart.
Dismantle. Yes.
Dismantle. Thank you. Dismantle it and bring it back together. I think that it's about investing in relational infrastructure more than it is about investing in tools that prompt us notifications.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is that managers need to really lean into their core function, which is coaching and mentorship. And a lot of managers don't see themselves as coaches or mentors. They go out into the labor market, the talent market, they buy talent, they expect that talent to come in, hit the ground running with no feedback, and then they get massively frustrated when person XYZ is not able to do the job that they were hired to do, so they fire them, they go back into the labor market, they try to find somebody else, and the cycle rinses and repeats over and over again. And the primary driver is that they're not thinking of themselves as a coach and a mentor to their people. What do you think?
I mean, yes, I emphatically
yes.
agree with you, and I see it a lot. And I think that is one of the challenges, I think, with how we have traditionally thought about L&D is sometimes we think about all the learning being L&D's responsibility and therefore separates the responsibility of learning from the manager and gives it to L&D. And I think that is just one of the challenges that we face in sort of how some firms are structured these days and how L&D's operating model is materializing.
Yeah, if you're a manager, just think about this, this statement. I don't have time to develop my people today, because that's literally what you're saying, and that is your job is to develop your people. So anyway, just a little aside. Tessa, what have we not talked about today that you want to make sure that our listeners leave this conversation with?
I think the thing that I would love to leave folks with really is that we have actually quite a lot of learning or research about how learning works. More than I think people realize. We know quite a bit. Sure, there's a lot we don't know, but we know quite a bit about how the brain learns and what leads to effective learning and what doesn't. And there is scientific evidence that some practices don't result in learning and others do. And so I would encourage folks to really think about that. How can they better utilize the research on learning that exists to inform their program designs and therefore be more likely to drive effective learning as an outcome? And similarly around coaching and mentoring, we have quite a bit of research around what makes effective coaches and mentors, and using some of that research to inform practices and teaching for managers, I think, is a really effective use of time and resources.
All right. Well, I think the certification program, the certificate program that you outlined previously, and the link will be in the show notes. It'll be a great place for a lot of folks to start. Tessa, let's have a little fun, a couple of lightning round questions at the end here. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Tessa Forshaw, you've just won a $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a general cause. Who do you pick?
Goodwill. I love Goodwill.
Excellent. Good choice. Second, I give you access to a really little time machine, and you can send a short message to an earlier version of Tessa Forshaw. What's the message, and what previous version do you send it to?
I mean, other than learning styles are not real, as we already discussed, I think I would say to myself that having rapid and varied experiences that don't necessarily make sense in terms of obvious career progression is actually really, really helpful to you, and don't shut a door on an experience just because you think that it doesn't make like very logical sense at 21 or 22 or whatever it is.
Yes, life is not a straight line, is it?
Amen.
Tessa, we are all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So something I'm really working on. I'm an Australian woman, and in Australia we have a tendency for this thing called tall poppy syndrome, which is essentially the idea that if you're a tall poppy, you get cut down. And so culturally, I've learnt a lot to say things like we, and to sort of have a little bit of hesitation in my articulation of things, and to give to not have authority, not speak with authority. And so I'm really working on trying to have ownership of things where that's appropriate, and to back myself, I suppose, if I'm being really honest.
Excellent. The tall poppy, yes, sticking your head up. Oh, yes. All right. Well, Tessa, you've been a fantastic guest today. Thank you so much for your contributions. Where can folks get a hold of you and your and the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn is certainly the best place to follow me, the latest research that we're publishing, and also just to reach out. And then in the show notes, I'll make sure that, again, everyone has the link to the certificate program and information about the Workforce Learning and Innovation Initiative at the Harvard Graduate School of Education.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. My name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find the show on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends, your family, a neighbor, and maybe a colleague, especially a colleague in your learning and development department. The show is produced by Nicholas Temte, and we'll see you next time on The Balancing Act.